Okay guys, here's a little video with the instructions of what the plan is to do for the week. This is benchmarking week, and essentially what we're doing is we're benchmarking at the start of our base training phase. What I traditionally call the winter maintenance phase is now over, and we're going into a base training phase which will be extended depending on where your A race plans to lie throughout the season. So essentially a lot of people will be in the base phase over the next 3 to 4, maybe even up to 5 months depending on where you plan to race. So just to go through it, this is be the same for everyone. So the options are here is that in the first thing on the Monday you'll have little video clips. This is the explanation, and by listening to this you're going to see where we're at. So it's a little video of instructions of what I'm talking about now, and under that then there's a new functionality on Training Peaks called Workout Builder. That's what we're going to be using going forward for bike and run sessions. Swim sessions will remain the same, critical swim speed and whatnot. So effectively what you need to do is watch those 2 video clips first and foremost. Essentially for the week, I'm not really overly bothered by the amount of training you're doing, so I'm going to add 1 more run session. We've got 2 bike sessions in there, we've got 2 swim sessions in there, so there's 6 sessions in total. It's pretty much the same volume as what you've been doing up to now. Okay, so pretty much there's 3 different things here that I'd like you all to look into before you get started. So we've got our bike zones, which is either whether you're training with power or whether you're training with heart rate. So you need to read up on the training zones based on power or based on heart rate. They're going to be applicable to you going forward. So if you're using power, your training plan going forward will be prescribed in power. If you're using heart rate, your training plan going forward for cycling will be within heart rate. Swimming our zones are using critical swim speed. So effectively all the training sessions are utilising critical swim speed, but they're explained in a little bit more detail in there, and they're kind of correspondent to what traditional zones would be, zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. Okay, so there's a little bit of explanation in there for anybody who isn't familiar with the terms critical swim speed. You've then got to do a critical swim speed test. Okay, so what we have here is effectively an advanced test for people who are very competent at swimming and whatnot, and we also have a beginner CSS test. What I call is a validating set, and effectively what we have is pink mist validating sessions for anybody who does the beginners. And I'm just going to add now the swim session for anybody who's an advanced swimmer. So effectively it's the classic red mist set. Okay, you do that as the second session in the week, and if you do that session, you'll pretty find out whether your CSS is correct or not, and you might need to adjust same. Okay, so that's the swimming zones done. Next thing, you're going to be on your bike. We've already talked about the training zones. So effectively you have an option when you're on the bike of either doing a functional power test for 20 minutes, or you have an option of doing a lactate threshold test. So essentially the workout builder is already in there and explaining what you need to do. So it's a traditional 20-minute power test, exactly lactate threshold test and whatnot. Next thing, we're moving on to the run training zones. We've literally simplified it, so we've got our 5 different zones. These are roughly based or loosely based on Daniel's running formula, with the exception of zone 1, which what we have here is 65 to 70%, is kind of what we would call active recovery regeneration. So it'd be a lot of warming up, cooling down, and also the odd day we would do a recovery. We have to remember we're not pure runners, so sometimes it's a little bit better to run a little bit easier when you're dealing with triathletes than with runners alone. So the test that we're prescribing, you have the option of entering a 5k test, 10k test into the Daniel's running calculator, or your most recent one. I have to say that has to be done in the last 2 weeks. There's no point in having a 6-week gap since when you ran a 19-minute 5k in August and you didn't run for 6 or 7 weeks, and then all of a sudden you're inputting those times. You can predict your times, guys. You're all experienced enough triathletes to have a fair idea where you're at. Or else if you want to do a test which is the Joe Friel method, effectively you're going out, you're warming up, you're running a 30-minute test based on your own threshold, and effectively the using your Garmin device, whatever you can your average pace is around after the 30 minutes would be a fair indication of what your threshold is. So what we all want you to do then is you need to go in to your individual names. As you see here, I'm actually in a training plan. So if I go into my workout library and I pull up myself, I'm going to load that up. I need to click on my name on Training Peaks, okay, and that brings me into this box here. I need to go down to zones, okay, and when I'm in zones, I have this set up for myself pretty much, so effectively I know what my default heart rate are. Now remember, we're prescribing by pace, yeah, and power or heart rate. So if you're using heart rate, effectively your heart rate default value is what we would call basically in here. So what we're doing here is we're going in for a type, we're going lactate threshold heart rate, we're using the Andy Coggan method, okay. You need to put in whatever your threshold heart rate is in that test, yeah, and you want to put in your max heart rate if you have it. Doesn't need to be there, it doesn't really matter for the calculation of the scores and your resting heart rate, okay. So once you put in your threshold heart rate from that 30-minute test, in here you apply it, and all of a sudden you've got your zones, and those zones will be specific within the thing, okay. So that's my heart rate zones. When I go down to power, I have a fair idea my threshold is power. Again, same thing, threshold power. The method we're using is Andy Coggan's. It's going to calculate it for me. It's calculated. And then when I go down there, I apply that. And that's my power zones. Now we want to go in for pace. We want to go in for pace. So for this is where we need to be careful, guys. If I go up here, yeah, and I go into my account, I need to change my account so that it actually is giving me in metrics, okay. So saying here unit preference metric, and I want to go date month year, and I'm going to save that change. For whatever reason, there's a quirk in the system. It seems to always default to back to yards in a minute, and that's because I need to change the setting in Ross's. So I know this is based on yards, but actually my threshold is in there at 129. So what you need to make sure is that you're effectively using meters rather than yards. You need to put in your threshold pace, okay. Now essentially what we're doing here, it doesn't give you the option to have critical swim speed, okay. So what we're going to do is we're putting in threshold speed, distance and time. And what you have here effectively is you've got the option of duration, and it's giving you pretty much a way of method of doing it. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick the Joe Friel method for swimming, okay, and we're going distance and time. So essentially what this is a 1,000-meter test, okay. So what that is called is your T time, and effectively it does the exact same thing as the CSS pace. You divide your 1,000 meters by 10 to get your threshold speed. So just say you want to put in the time that's closest to your CSS pace. So for example, I know mine is going to be in around 16 minutes. If I calculate that, it's going to bring in a 1,000-meter pace at 128. And sorry for the confusion here, because this isn't represented in meters a second, but I know for exactly if I go about 16:15 and calculate, that should bring in 129 per 100 meters, which effectively when converted back into yards is going to be 123. So that's traditionally stating that these are your kind of zones, okay. So effectively when we're looking at these zones, they're not really making much sense to us, so we're pretty much going to be ignoring them. So all you need to do is you can apply that in, okay. And that pretty much will give you your swim zones in. It's only a method of calculating your critical swim speed, so it's irrelevant what zone you're at, or not your critical swim speed, your training stress score. It'll calculate it automatically, and that's what we're looking for in the end of the day. The final thing here then again, you're going to come to your threshold pace. So pretty much what you're going to do is, remember this can be a minute per miles or minute per kilometers. It's already in the minute per miles, and I don't want to switch out of it to change it over. So if I was using minute per miles, I'm going to say my threshold at the moment would be quite slow because I haven't been doing much running. So if I say 650 per pace. I want to go, again, threshold speed, Joe Field running, and effectively what that's going to do is going to calculate those zones it's going to calculate our zones based on your minute per miles. Now, what I want to do is that this is where it gets a little bit difficult, and you can see that I've automatically done this down here. So you can actually go choose type, okay, and choose method. And what I've actually done is I've put in and programmed in my own training zones here. So you'll get an option of about 7 or 8 zones where you can manually put in your own training zones. So my zone 1 is based on regeneration. Now if you go back into your training peaks, back into your run training zones, you'll see the way we have these intervalled out. Okay, so regeneration, I know pretty much that's going to be to 928, okay, based on a 650 minute mile threshold. Okay, easy is going to be that range, marathon again, and whatnot. So you can put in, so if you use your Daniels running calculator and you're just going to use a short range around that, that's a way of actively adding in those running zones. Look guys, if you get a little bit confused with it, don't worry about it. You're all in on coaching packages, so you can do most of this work yourself. The running ones will be a little bit confusing to you, so we'll come in anyway and make sure and oversee it that it's done correctly. Okay, so that's just pretty much an example. You might save us a little bit of hassle by getting used to doing that yourselves, adding your own training zones and whatnot. And every time we do a benchmark throughout the season, you're going to be able to adjust those training zones based on that benchmark. Okay, thanks very much.